quantify the fintech development in China, from the breadth of coverage to the depth of usage across different province and different business, including mobile payment, online lending, insurance, and investments in a digital way. This index is basically a composition of a number of indicators, including like the number of Alipay account in 10,000 people, or the amount of payment that is made through the mobile payment system, or the amount of money that has been invested through the digital investment business. From this inclusion index, we find two quite striking features. The first one is that the pace of financial inclusion is extraordinary in China. It started at around 33.6 in 2011, but in 2020 it's now become 334. It's exactly 10 times of the number 9 years ago. The growth rate was very high at first, but now of course it's slowing down because the business is getting bigger. But even in 2020, with the global pandemic going on, the growth rate is still at around 5.6%. One reason is that, the usage of the QR code I was talking earlier, we use it as an indicator of health condition. So it becomes a must to everyone, because if you want to enter a building, you go to a station or restaurant, you need to present that code to be able to enter. So it becomes even more essential to our daily lives. The second feature is that the narrowing of the provincial gap from 2011 to 2020. Can you turn to the next page, please? Yep. Here we can see three figures that shows you the inclusion index in different provinces through time, from 2011, 2015 to 2020. The red color means we have a high level of financial inclusion, and the green color means the level of financial inclusion is rather low. Starting from 2011, where the index begins, actually you can see most part of China is in green color, and we can only find some red color near the coastline, where those are the major city in China. But when we turn to 2020, the whole country actually become red or orange. That means there's a high level of financial inclusion. Fintech has moved rapidly into many different regions across the whole country. It reduced the provincial inequality in an extraordinary pace. So when we look back to see what we have done to achieve such pace and depth in the financial inclusion and also the development in fintech, we find that it all started from the mobile payment business. Can you turn to the next page, please? Thank you. We find that it all started from the mobile payment business is the most prominent fintech business in China. The unicorn player Alipay or WeChat Pay, they all started to launch a money market fund at around 2013. So basically you move your cash money to this money market fund. And first you can get an annual rate of 5% in return, but now the rate reduced to around only 2%, but still you get some interest back by investing your money into that fund. And second, it's quite convenient that you can actually make mobile payment with the money in the money market funds anytime you like by simply scanning a QR code, and you can pay and you can pay to the services you want. The annual transaction grow from nearly 14 trillion in 2013 to 277 trillion RMB in 2018. The annual growth rate is around 80%, which is massive. Starting from this mobile payment system, there's an ecosystem that is built around this. One of them is online lending, because these fintech giants like Alipay or WeChat Pay, they can collect digital footprint through the media data or your payment history data and so on to access your credit worthiness by using machine learning or big data analysis. But then things has changed in the last 2 years, because there is a game changer in the industry, which is called the central bank digital currency. Yeah, can you turn to the next page, please? Yeah. In 2014, the People's Bank of China, which is the Central Bank of China, PBC, has started to study this central bank digital currency. And in 2019, PBC has announced that they have completed the top level design and have started to implement trials in a major city of China. This digital currency is a hybrid system of digital currency and electronic payments. Normally, we call it the DCEP. There are 3 features that distinguish between DCEP and the electronic cash we put in the bank account or in the mobile payment providers. The first one is that DCEP is a legal tender, substitution for M0. It's almost impossible to default, but for those money that we put in our bank account or we put in the money market fund in Alipay, for example, there is a very small possibility to default. But for now, because it's just a form of M0, so PBC do not pay any interest to DCEP. But in the future, we are expecting it to change because, for example, for Alipay, when they launch this money market fund, they pay any rate of return like 2 to 5%. That attracts a lot of people wanting to put their money into that money market fund and then use those money to make mobile payments. So we are expecting the central bank to change the DCEP to a form of M1 or M2, maybe in the future. M0 in China is now just about 4% of the M2, which is the broad money supply. But so that means even if this DCEP completely replace M0, it does not constitute a large part of the country's monetary system. The second feature that distinguishes this DCEP to those electronic cash is that DCEP will operate in a two-tier system. So the central bank will not interact with the public directly, but they're gonna do that through some authorized institutions. And then the general public will exchange cash for digital currency from those institutions. And this DCEP is 100% reverse. That means if you exchange cash from those institutions, those institutions will need to put all the money reserved in the central bank. Another thing is that the central bank is very likely to set a ceiling on the amount of transaction, and an account balance on DCEP just to avoid a bank run in a digital term or in a digital form, because if the public exchange all their deposit into digital currencies, it's a digital form of bank run, which the central bank was very likely to avoid that happening. The third feature is that this DCEP is token based. That means value transfer can be achieved without an account, without a bank account or the Alipay account. You need to register in your phone. Or it can also transfer money without internet. For example, it could be quite useful next year when Beijing is holding the Winter Olympic. So for the foreigners who come to China, would have a digital wallet without a bank account in China, and also enjoy the convenience of mobile payments. Let's see. Well, it's still too early to conclude the impact of DCEP because it's just started to trial in some major city in China, and next year the Winter Olympic we're gonna see a even bigger test of how this DCEP gonna change the mobile payment industry. But obviously it's an alternative to the current mobile payment approach, and it's quite likely that many will actually alter to DCEP instead of staying at the current mobile payment providers, because by do not need to transfer money with internet connections. So there's some benefits that we're expecting it to kind of challenge to the current mobile, the current mobile payment systems. We believe it could be a big game changer. When we look back to this kind of unusual success in China's fintech development, we find that there are three factors that would be the main reason for this extraordinary pace and depth to the fintech development and financial inclusions. Can you turn to the next page, Dewi? Yeah, thank you. There are three reasons that we believe that caused the extraordinary pace and depth in fintech development. First is the need for financial services is quite strong in China. The traditional financial industry cannot keep pace with the growth in China's economy. Small entities cannot get access to financial services. So fintech weighed in and actually provide all the convenience and the financial services to SMEs or low-income households. And the second reason is the rapid development of technology, such as cloud computing, big data analysis. This kind of technology actually help reduce information asymmetry. For example, the online banking credit ranking models are able to reduce the adverse selection and moral hazard problems, so that this kind of online banking companies are able to access the financial risk and to control this financial risk. The third reason, and I think is the most important reason, is the slack regulation in this industry, especially in the early stage. Basically, the government does not almost not playing any regulation on the fintech development. But now it becomes a lot tighter than before. There was a new draft of regulation for online lending that is released last November, and that triggers the suspension of IPO of the Ant Group, which is the owner of the Alipay. It's like the largest IPO in the world, but is suspended because of the new draft of regulation announced by the by the government. And yeah, can you turn to the final page? Thank you. Yeah. Again, when we look back to the to the fintech development of China, we have learned quite some lessons. In many ways, we find that the fintech development has improved financial services, such as like the SMEs are able to easily access to financial services, but it also generates some new financial risk or even social problems. For example, a few years ago, the collapse of P2P platform in China actually generates a higher social impact than financial impact, because it involves a very large number of small investors. Most of them, like a lot of them, are just old people with their pension monies. So it's more of a social instability to the government. The second thing we learned is that the regulation and policy too need to be devised in a timely manner. We take the P2P platform as example again. The first P2P platform was established in 2007, but the regulation of P2P was not announced until 2016. And once those regulations are announced, the whole business is kind of deterred at once. And apart from this, the regulator also need to apply digital technology to improve their regulatory capability. We have fintech, and we also need to have regulation technology, which is called RegTech. But at the same time, when we imposing all the regulation to this industry, regulator also need to open the door for innovations and to find the balance between innovation and the stability of the macroeconomies. Yep, that's it for my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chen. Thank you for the presentations here. And ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, concerns, or thoughts, you may write down in the dialog box. Yeah. Oh, there's one questions already. And Professor Jingzhi, you were mentioning about some major cities, yeah, that already apply the DC or EP, yeah, some major cities, yeah.
Yeah.
Could you mention where are they? The cities?
Mostly the big city near the coastline, like Shenzhen, Shanghai, and also Beijing.
Those are big
but
cities.
At the moment, at the moment, DCEP it's no different to the electronic cash we put in the mobile payment providers. We simply use it to pay bills or just simply some cash payments are used currently. But in the future, we are actually expecting it to change and to affect our life in a even more deeper way. But yeah, at the moment we can't see the main difference between this DCEP to the system.
Okay, all right. And allow me to take one question from the audience here. This is from Mr. Yudhistira Permana. Mr. Yudhis, Pak Yudhis, would you please unmute? This is an open mic, yeah.
Yeah.
You may give a direct questions, yeah, to our speaker.
Yeah, many thanks. Well, I'm just curious about the implementation of the digital money, digital currency in China, in particular about the privacy. Perhaps you can tell us about that, how they implement that in CBDC in particular. Many thanks.
Yep. Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah. So yeah, can you please tell us about the implementation of the digital money or digital currency in particular? Because I've heard the privacy still problematic. I'm not really sure how problematic that is, but yeah. So you can tell us about that.
Yeah. So currently, this DCEP is just the first step of the central bank's digital currency ambitions. Actually, not just China. Actually, I think even in Indonesia, all the governments globally have actually tested this central bank digital currency. But in China, it's just the first step, although China started quite early, and we have implemented quite a lot of trial. For example, like paying interest to the digital currency is not happening for now because it's just a substitute for M0. But it could have, for now, it only have a very limited impact to China's macroeconomy, and because M0 just consists a very small percentage of the bought money supply. But in the future, once this DCEP could have potentially a very large impact to the fintech sector, because as I was introducing earlier, daily connection with our friend, and then they use those data to access your credit worthiness. And then they started to build the mobile payment system around this app. But for people who want some privacy and also do not want to share too many data of ourselves, I think DCEP is a better choice, and I think it's kind of a big change to the industry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chen. Thank you, Pak Yudhis. Audience, if you have concerns, thoughts, or questions, please write down the chat box, or you can unmute yourself. Okay, one more question from me, Mr. Chen. You're saying that everything's mobile, everything is paid in the mobile payment. And what happened to ATMs right now? This is very simple questions. Yeah, what about to the ATM?
Yeah, it's like history now. Like, yeah, even commercial banking, it's yeah, even the small cities, they in page 5, when I show the inclusion index of China, you can see like most of the city has a very high level of financial inclusion. So actually, most of because this Alipay or WeChat Pay app, it's kind of now serve like 1 billion people in China. It serve everyone, so everyone have this kind of app, and they're gonna use this app for like in their daily life. So not just in big city now, but in many even remote regimes in China, people are all affected and all enjoying some of the convenience of fintech development. Yeah, that's quite extraordinary, because in China we are used to believe that because most of the population are on the east side of China, close to the coastline. But the western part of China is some kind of remote area because there are low population and stuff. But fintech kind of conquered that difficulties and entered those remote area in China and started to provide some convenience to the people there.
I see. Thank you so much for the information. And
Yeah,
ladies and gentlemen, before I proceed to our next discussion, please fill in the attendance form by clicking the link. You can scroll up, or I shall copy and paste again. Please take a look at in the dialog box. And Mr. Jingzhi, I thank you so much for the presentation. It's because of the time constraints that we should end this session.
No problem.
I'm so sorry that
thank you very much.
I really appreciate your efforts into making this conference possible with your participations. You're using your handphones, and that also proves that we are mobile. We can use any device right now, And
Sure.
And ladies and gentlemen, please be on cam, because I'm going to take some pictures. Pictures of us. All together, we have. Wait a second. We have 3. We have 3 slides. Okay. On my counts, slide 1. Okay. All right. If your connection is good, so please show us your faces. Thank you. I'm going to start the slide 1. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to go to the second slide. Okay. Right. The last one. Okay. Thank you. And Mr. Chen, there will be one more presentation given by Mr. Miguel Escobar. If you're available, I'd like you to stay. But if you have things to do after this for your work, so you may leave this room. But I really hope that you could stay with us. However, thank you so much for the presentations.
No problem. Thank you for inviting me.
And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to proceed to the next presentations. But however, Mas Miguel or Bapak Miguel is not available right now because he has a commitment in his in US. But he's going to join us pretty soon. He already sent a pre-recorded video of his presentations. And before we move to the video, I'd like to share a little bit about Mr. Miguel Escobar Varela, Ph.D. He's going to talk about the technology, cultural diversity, and sustainable development. Mas Miguel, or Pak Miguel, that's what we call him. That's how we call him. Is a theater researcher, web developer, and translator. In his research, he applies computational methods to study Indonesian theater and develops interactive websites to share his results with the wider public. He is an assistant professor at the National University of Singapore and academic advisor on the digital scholarship to the NUS libraries. He's the convener of the Informal Digital Humanities Singapore group, and he gives me the homepage address. And he's on the editorial board of Theater Survey, Global Performance Studies, and Computational Literary Studies. And he's the author of Theater as Data, Computational Journeys into Theater Research, University of Michigan Press, 2021. A list of his writings and digital projects is available at his homepage. Yeah, I'm going to share the links so that you can check this out. Okay. Take a look at the chat box. I'm writing it right now down there. Right. So he's going to join us for the question and answer sessions. And the topic, once again, technology, cultural diversity, and sustainable development. Yeah. How those three elements encounter. Are there any reconstructed or deconstructed cultural elements, or is digitalizing culture is a form of sustaining culture itself? Let Mr. Miguel elaborate his thoughts. Yeah. Ms. Hanik, is the video available with you?
Available, Miss.
All right.
Okay, ready.
Thank you.
It's okay to start?
Yes, please. Thank you. I still cannot see it, Miss Honey.
Okay, wait a moment.
And ladies and gentlemen, you may take a look at Mr. Miguel's works, yeah, at both links.
Wait, Miss.
Yes, please. Miss Honey, would you please share the computer audio?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Miss Hani. We cannot hear the sound.
Miss Hani?
Wait, miss.
Or shall I try from my computer?
Okay.
Could everybody see?
Yes, we see.
The organizers of this conference for giving me the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you.
Could you listen to the audio?
Yes, miss. Yes.
Yes,
Great.
perfect.
Okay, all right. I will continue. Continue.
I'm greatly honored to be able to speak today about the connection between culture, digital media, and sustainable development. Just give me a moment to share my screen. You should be able to see this now. So in this talk, I want to explore two ideas which are interconnected. The first one is that culture is a driver of sustainable development. The second one is that culture itself must be sustained in sustainable development. So in my own work, I study the performing arts of Indonesia. I am fascinated by the incredible richness and diversity of the Javanese performing arts, but also about the performing arts elsewhere. So I will refer in this talk to some examples from my own area of work, which I hope are interesting to the audience here, but I would also encourage you to think about other ways in which we can understand culture and use digital media to connect culture to sustainable development. But before I go to talk about some examples from wayang kulit, which is the art form that I study, I want to spend some time thinking theoretically about these issues. And as you all know, this definition, of course, has featured elsewhere in this conference. And it's a definition that we often use when we talk about sustainable development, which according to this 1987 Brundtland Commission report is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That's a pretty general definition that has been revised in the decades after this report was first published. And I'm specifically interested in how the role of culture has been refined in connection to this objective. So, for example, the 2003 UNESCO Convention emphasizes the importance of intangible cultural heritage as a guarantee of sustainable development. I'm particularly excited about this definition because I am a theater scholar and I consider theater, dance, and other forms of the performing arts as components of intangible cultural heritage. And I fully agree that this is something that guarantees sustainable development. I will explore this through a few more examples later on. But let me include one more quote from another UNESCO document. So 10 years later, the UN, sorry, this is not from the, yeah, also from UNESCO, they propose seeing culture as a driver. So not just as a guarantee, but having an active role to play as a driver and enabler of sustainable development. And this is part of this statement of the International Congress that was held in China in 2013. So I want to give you a couple of specific examples in how I see culture as being this enabler of sustainable development. And as I announced earlier, I will connect this to my own area of specialization, which is the performing arts of Java, and specifically wayang kulit. So sometimes when I talk to people from Indonesia, if they are not actively part of the wayang community, they imagine wayang to be a vestige of the past. And that is true to an extent. There is a very important element of cultural transmission, of preserving certain types of ideas intact from the present until today. And many conventions have changed little over time, although there's also cultural evolution in the form. But what some people don't always know is that there's also what I call contemporary wayang, or wayang contemporáneo. And the proponents of wayang contemporáneo often try to develop performances that are actively trying to reach out to younger people in society today, but also to use wayang as a form of reflection on the challenges that we face as a society and the types of things that we can do about that. Let me give you a couple of examples. But before I do that, I want to emphasize one more point. So this is from the International Journal of Cultural Policy, and two researchers, Les Raymond Bacchus and Cyprien Radavoy, say that cultural policy can and should play a more active role in shaping social change. I would want to add to this that we don't need to think about cultural policy as something that is top-down, imposed necessarily by an institution or a government, but it's also something that we actively can shape. And this is a role that is specifically important for artists. So with that, let me give you these examples from wayang kulit. And in both cases, I will connect this to specific sustainable development goals. So development goal number 5, as you all know, is gender equality. And traditionally, the world of the performing arts, not only in Java, but in many other places, has been male dominated. But many artists are also interested in exploring the limitations of traditional narratives. This is one of my favorite performances by the late Slamet Kundono, a true genius of the form of contemporary wayang. And in this performance from 2005, it's called Pertaruhan Drupadi. And those of you who are familiar with the story of Drupadi, Drupadi is a character that is mostly silent. And a bunch of men decide her future or go to war because of affronts on her honor and many other things. But in this particular story, in a very creative way, what Slamet Kundono does is that he imagines Drupadi who speaks back, who doesn't settle for the roles that are imposed on her. So the performance begins as the traditional narrative that we all know, but halfway through the performance, Drupadi breaks with the conventions of fiction, and she says, no, I don't agree with this. I need to go and figure out for myself who I want to be. So she leaves the world of wayang and goes on this tour of the world and meets important politicians, important film stars from around the world at that time in 2005. And then comes back disappointed, talks to the Dalang, to Slamet Kundono, and says, I do not know what to do. And then Slamet Kundono answers, well, I cannot give you the answer. Women need to figure this out for themselves. So the performance ends in this open question. If you're interested, you can go and find the full performance here at the Contemporary Wayang Archive, CWA, with subtitles in Indonesian and English. But of course, this is only one example. And here one could still say, well, this is still a man talking about these issues. What about the voice of women? And indeed, there are many famous female Dalang who are facing other challenges to become well-known. But if I could give one example of a young, upcoming, and influential female Dalang, Ni Elisha or Karusalasop, many of you are familiar with her, I know that she's also been invited to talk about her work at the Sekolah Vokasi of UGM. So we also are increasingly listening to the voices of people that perhaps in the past their voices were not necessarily heard. And I would like to suggest that by enabling these different forums for expression, we can see how culture can be a driver and enabler of sustainable development. Let me give you a second example. In this case, from Wayang Kanchil, the late Kilet Jar Subroto, well known to the community at Sekolah Vokasi and beyond, a true master of the form and somebody who's remembered fondly in the city of Jogja. He is remembered because of a specific innovation. So the story of Kanchil, the mouse deer, as this trickster, has been part of the cultural memory of Southeast Asia for a very long time. The Kanchil stories began in Indonesia, but they're also well known in Malaysia, in Singapore, and beyond. And typically in these stories, the Kanchil, this mouse deer, is a trickster. So he's trying to outwit his enemies. But what Lejar did is that he combined the story of Kanchil with an ecological narrative. So in the reinvention of Mbah Lejar, what he did was he created these figures of Wayang Kanchil and of a variety of other animals found not only in Indonesia, but also in other parts of the world. And these are stories about ecological devastation, many of them about water, like the one you can find here in this link. So this is a performance that we recorded with the late Kilet Jar and his grandson, Kinanang Kanchil, in 2012. And this story is primarily about water, clean water and sanitation. But in his work, what Mbah Lejar tried to do was to really think about how this figure of the trickster can be a metaphor for how we can creatively come up with solutions beyond the current climate crisis. So this is a second example of how this apparently old world of Wayang can provide a space for reflection of things that matter to us today and which are crucially important for a sustainable future. Where does digital technology come into all of this? I believe that technology has a key function to play in helping to preserve and disseminate artworks that engage sustainable development. Specifically now in the context of this terrible pandemic that we can't always enjoy performances with one another, we need to rely on digital media to understand the performances that are happening, to see what artists are doing. But the other thing is that even if we could meet and together enjoy a performance, there's still the record of performances from the recent past that is preserved in digital format. And that's one of the things that we want to do in the Contemporary Wayang Archive that I've talked about for a while. I gave you just 2 examples, but the performances here talk about what sustainability means in a variety of ways, about equality, about poverty, about the environment, about gender, but also about the role of culture itself. What does it mean to be Javanese? What does it mean to be Indonesian in the 21st century? And I believe that the artists whose work we've compiled here give a variety of answers to these complex but important questions. You can also find this digital interactive essay at wayangcontemporero.com. And here, this is one interpretation of how these performances that I mentioned earlier explore a variety of goals. So in these diagrams, you can see how they are reimagining the conventions of Wayang. And I won't explain that part now, but you can find more information here. What I want to draw your attention to is these circles that are popping up from these diagrams. So for example, here, I don't know if you can see this one says family, and this one as well. But there are many other topics that we assigned to these performances. So for example, here, when it's about family, they're trying to that means they're trying to reimagine what the roles of people within a family must be. Issues around gender, around filial piety, around many other things are actively reimagined in these performances. And often they are connected to key questions about sustainable development. You can find, this is a diagram of all the performances and all the different things that they address. So that was the first idea. As you might recall, I said at the beginning of this presentation that there are two things I'm interested in. The first one was how culture itself can be a driver. So that's why I talked about cultural policy, why I talked about how specific performances are triggering conversations and providing their own answers to what it means to live in a changing world and how we can all contribute to the challenges of sustainable development. But I believe there's another equally important answer. And this is something that I found in this report, also from the UN by José Pérez de Cuellar, and he talks about our creative diversity. He specifically links cultural diversity and sustainable development. So the idea here is a little bit different from what we saw before. It's not so much that culture supports a separate goal, but that culture itself is something that must be supported. So I believe that one of the most incredible things about the world is our cultural diversity. Often, sustainable development is framed in terms of the environment and of ecological diversity, and that's, of course, incredibly important and something that we must preserve. But there is also this creative diversity, the range of art forms from around the world that need to be sustained. So we need to think of a mode of development that doesn't erase this diversity, but preserves it. And one problem of globalization is that it does tend to give more popularity to certain types of cultural forms, certain kinds of films, certain kinds of music. That's what's considered important. But on the flip side, globalization and digital tools can also help us realize that there's this incredible array of different expressions. Wayang is, of course, one of them. So I will also give you examples from that, but also from digital culture more broadly. So just to emphasize this idea, I believe that development needs to preserve both ecological and cultural diversity. So sometimes people think that Wayang is dying out, and often when I talk to Indonesians, they are surprised that I want to study Wayang. They see this as a form from the past, as something that nobody really cares about. But what I answer is that, well, it's still alive and well. Even now, in the times of the pandemic, people are performing, sharing their work via YouTube. And what you see in this slide is a project that we did a few years ago where we started to trace and track every performance that we could find a mention for online. So you can see here that there are certain places that are extremely active in terms of performances. There's this also like hotspot in the kind of like Banyumas, Cilacap, Kebumen, and Ciamis area, which is not always well studied. So basically here, the darker an area, the more performances there are over there. We are now very familiar with this type of hotspot maps because of the pandemic, sadly, but this is a happier version of this map. What we see here is something positive, the number of performances. And we also made an interactive version where you see how things change over time, over a few years. And when we did this, we found that there would be, on average, 12 performances per day. So those are still thousands of performances every year. And the people who say that this is disappearing, they tend to imagine that nobody performs anymore, or this only happens in museums. But these are all performances that happened every single day, 12 on average, throughout Java. So I would say that the first thing we need to do to think about sustaining cultural diversity is to realize where we are, to track how often things happen. And we've done this for Wayang, but we should do this for other forms of cultural expression as well, so that we can also measure if things are declining or increasing. there are also people who try to combine popular culture and wayang. So personally, I'm not committed to a form of wayang that only preserves the tradition. I think that sustainable development means being able to combine new ideas with the old ones, to combine popular culture such as hip hop that you see here with these 1,000 years of history of wayang kulit. We've also made projects such as this one, the digital wayang encyclopedia that you can also capture. And this is an online encyclopedia of wayang kulit characters that tries to preserve the diversity of versions of the same character. So instead of giving you a single definition, it shows you how often the same character has multiple origin stories, or sometimes they say, oh, you know, she's the daughter of this and this other character, but there are other versions. So here we try to give an overview of those multiple versions. We're also doing a project in collaboration with the Yale Art Gallery at the University and the University of Connecticut with Professor Cohen over there, where we look at the diversity of the wayang kulit puppets. This is based on a collection of 20,000 puppets. So often when we think about, say, like, you know, Untitled Chapter pictured here, there's not only one way to represent Untitled Chapter visually, but often there are hundreds, and you have distinct traditions that are separate in, like, even between Java, within Java, between Solo and Jogja, there will be differences. If you go to East Java, it's different again. And if you go to Cirebon, it's different again. So what we want to see here is that diversity of culture, that culture itself, when it's alive, wants to find multiple expressions. So part of what makes cultural development healthy is this range of continuous innovation. And we see that that has happened over many centuries in the past. That's why we have this diversity now. And we must encourage people that want to combine also popular culture and tradition. At least that's my view. And I'd be happy to engage in discussions with those who feel differently about these topics. But you might say, what about just popular culture? Isn't that culture as well? And my answer is yes. As much as I love the traditional performing arts of Java, I also think that we need to recognize that for many young people, the way in which they express themselves is through things such as selfies, through things such as Instagram. And I'm especially inspired by the work of Lev Manovich. He is a computer scientist based in New York at NYU, and he has used analytics to study popular culture. For example, this is a project where he did visualizations from Flickr of, in this case, from New York, and you can see these are the streets of New York, and the color is actually just a collection of dots. And each dot, depending on the color, it tells you who took the photo. So red pictures are taken by tourists, and blue pictures by locals, and yellows might be by either. So what you see in this image is that the places where the locals go and the places where the tourists go are different. And this is just one example, but we could do many other things with, say, Instagram, and apply this not to places that are far away, like New York, but to think about what that means for different cities in Indonesia. I would love to see somebody do an analysis of the different Instagram cultures of Bandung and Jogja and Jakarta, and other places that are like in Sulawesi and beyond. And just to give you a second example, Manovich also made this project called Selfie City, where you can compare selfies from many different cities around the world. And he did include Bangkok as a place from Southeast Asia, but nothing from Indonesia yet. So I think there's plenty of space for us to think about how we can think about culture, preserve culture, and connect these to sustainable development goals. The conclusion that I want to leave you with is that culture is central for making sense of a changing world. It helps us think of our identities and plan for the future. And I think that traditional artists in forms such as wayang have actively done this. They've used their form to reimagine what the future should be like. But we should also recognize that a lot of younger people are turning to Instagram and many other digital platforms to also think about their own contemporary culture, the challenges they face, and the ways in which we can imagine a better future. So with that, I'd like to end my presentation for today. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much, Miguel, Mr. Miguel. And ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions, concerns, or thoughts, would you please write down in the chat box? I know we're extending the time, but I think we can have another 5 minutes here for a question and answer. And welcome to Miguel Escobar. He's here with us.
Hello,
Miguel, how are you?
Terima kasih, Bu Dewi. Yeah, pleasure to be live with all of you now, and looking forward to taking some questions or some comments. I'd love to hear the audience's thoughts on these ideas as well.
Yes, Miguel, I shared the 2 links that you shared with me to the audience, and I was hoping that they also browsed the internet, visiting your homepages. And I have one question, Miguel, while waiting for the others. I was wondering about the data for the performances throughout in Java and Bali. Did you go to all performances?
Well, sadly no. So these were so this data, we got it from a website called kluban.net. So Kluban started as a project from friends of mine in Cilacap, and then they started collecting mentions from social media of performances. And then what we did was my research assistant called many of the people to verify the information. So we randomly selected some performances so we could verify if it was true. And then we went to a couple of places and tried to see if the data there was correct. So it's about 90% accurate. But yeah, here we are talking about 12 performances every day. So no one can see all of them at the same time, even if we wanted to. And for me, that's really what's interesting about that it's more than what we can perceive ourselves. It's just a way of realizing that it's still extremely alive in Java and beyond.
So that also that include all of the art forms or only the traditional events?
Well, so for that specific project, we only looked at wayang kulit and only at traditional wayang kulit. So the kind of, all night semalam suntuk performances. But I hope that we can do the same thing for many other projects. I was very inspired by the talk that Kristen Bishop gave us in the morning, and how she talked to us about these collaborations for collecting data on public health, for example, and education. And I would love to know more about the status of the performing arts in Java. So the project I showed was about wayang kulit, but we could do the same thing with dance, with other forms of traditional culture, festivals. And I think that we could learn a lot more about them if we collected the data.
Very interesting, Mas Miguel. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions, you may unmute yourself. Yeah, I'm offering an open mic. And please don't forget to fill in the attendance form. Yeah, you can check it out at the dialog box. Yeah. Oh yeah, Mas Miguel wrote something.
Yeah, there's also, I think Yudhishthira has a question. I can see here somebody's raised their hand.
Yep.
Oh, please. Yudhi, sorry. Yeah, I didn't know.
I have a question for you, Miguel. Well, I'm not specifically in the what's called in the linguistic or social work field, but yeah, I'm intrigued. I'm interested on how you, or the methodology or the method perhaps in collecting the data from your field in particular, because you told us that you went to performances and so on and so on. So, for example, I'm in economics, so we have like a sampling method in sampling, taking collection data, and so on and so on. So how can you proceed there? What is the data collection method that you use, and therefore you can infer that, okay, so I've got this conclusion based on the right sample. So yeah, I'm really intrigued on that.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, terima kasih Pak Yudhistira. So what we did for this project, we used a method called web scraping. So, for those in the audience who don't know, web scraping means that you write a program, and that program downloads all the data from a website. Now, of course, so we downloaded all the data from this website that has the calendar of the Wayang Kulit events. But then, as Pak Yudhistira was saying, like, how do you know that that data is correct? So what we did is we took a random subsample of the data. So that means that we randomly selected a proportion of all the performances, and then we tried to verify that the data was correct. So my research assistant called all of the Dalangs there to verify that the details in the data set were correct. But that only tells you if the data is correct, but there might be data that is not in the website. So how do we estimate the things that we're missing? For that, what we did is we selected a few locations. So a few dusun where we knew that wayang is sometimes common and others that not so common. And then we tried to also, through a research assistant, from that place, see every single performance, like manually log by talking to the people there. Often, people like the PA-RT, for example, would have detailed information about the performances. So then we compare that to what's on the website. So that gives us a measurement of how much of the data we're capturing. So taking these two things together, whether it's precise and how much it's captured, that's also something that people do for data analysis. These are methods that are used also in population studies, in also the natural sciences. So what we're doing is we're trying to adapt this for the study of culture. And I would just say that if anybody's interested in more detailed examples of how we collected data, how we process it, there's a book that I've written that is coming up. It's called Theater as Data, and it's going to be released open access for free next week. And it also has a lot of sample code, programming code, also all the data sets and the discussion of our methods. So people can go, you can learn from this. You might also want to redo our analysis and correct maybe some mistakes that we've done or combine it with data from other sources. So I would encourage any of you who are interested in that, if you can go to my website, you will be able to download the book from next week.
Congratulations, Pak Miguel, on your new book.
So yeah, well, basically you randomize your sample through scraping, right? The web scraping.
Well, so the web scraping so we scrape everything. So we scrape 100%, right. But then
using some keywords, yeah.
Sorry.
Using some keywords, you scrape the
data.
No.
So we scrape. So because this is from a specific website that only has Wayang Kulit data. So they have the schedule. It's like a jadwal of the performances, right, and it's in a format that is standard. So we just need to we scrape the entire data set. But the thing we randomize is check, because it's too large. We're talking about thousands of things per year. So we just check some randomized and manually we verify a subset, and that gives us a sense of roughly how likely is this to be correct, and that's similar to what people do in other fields.
Yeah. Okay, many thanks, Miguel. Seems to me like you're using machine learning thoroughly, and perhaps your book can be a textbook in the Faculty of Cultural Science in UGM. Many thanks, Miguel.
Thank you very much, Pak Yudhistira. Yeah.
Thank you, Pak Yudhis. Thank you, Pak Miguel. I'd like to invite one or two more questions. You may raise your hand. All right. Oh, it's at 12:12, Miguel. So sorry, yeah, it's because of the time constraints, yeah.
Yeah.
And so anyway, thank you so much, Pak Miguel Escobar, and congratulations on your new book, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Next week, ya.
Ya, terima kasih.
Saya catat.
Bu Dewi, terima
Next
kasih
week.
semuanya. Dan ya, sampai jumpa. Semoga tahun depan kita semua bisa bertemu di Indonesia ya. Terima kasih.
Thank you, and for your information, Pak Miguel has been having partnerships with UGM and also with the Sekolah Vokasi for several times, yeah. And he also brought students from NUS to UGM. So thank you so much, Pak Miguel, for this partnerships and collaborations. And ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed to the next sessions, I'd like everybody to be on cam. This is a Wi-Fi times, yeah, not Wi-Fi, the Zoom photo time. Needs to be documented, yeah. So we have a 55
Halo Mas Miguel.
participants right here.
Matur nuwun sangat Mas Miguel.
Oke, Bu, sami-sami.
Thank you very much, Bu Dewi.
Thank you, Bu Andri. Bu Andri here with participants of summer course, yeah.
Yes, Miss Dewi, yeah, they join this room, yeah. Many of them from China and also Vietnam and Malaysia, Pak Miguel.
Oh, fantastic. Great to have people from so many other places.
Yeah, some topics in the summer course about performing arts, Mas Miguel.
Yeah.
Excellent.
It is also closely related to our topic, so I asked the students to join this room.
Thank you, Bu Andri. And we have 3 slides here. We also have Bu Sylvie, our Vice Dean, yeah. Thank you, Bu Sylvie, for attending this session. And do we still have Mr. Chen? Jingzhi Chen? I guess he's no longer here. All right, let me take the first slide, yeah. Everybody, cheers. First slide, second one. And last one. All right. Once again, Mas Miguel, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody here. Ladies and gentlemen, I shall announce the parallel sessions, yeah, after this. There will be parallel sessions at 1 o'clock. It's a 45 minutes ahead, yeah. In the Socio-Economic and Humanities, in the breakout room, Socio 1, yeah. There will be 2 sessions. The first one will be having 5 presenters, and the second will be having also 5 presenters. Thank you so much for today, everyone. You may leave this breakout rooms. Thank you so much. Thank you.